Medfield TV presents Meet the Candidates, interviews with our citizens running for local offices. This series is brought to you by the joint efforts of Carol Mayer, Town Clerk, Kevin Murphy, Medfield High School Social Studies teacher, and Aditi Tate, Cheryl Dunley, and the staff of Medfield TV. I am Francesca D'Angelo from Medfield High School. I will be posing questions to the candidates. She will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and at the end of the questioning period, the candidate will have 2 additional minutes to address the TV audience. Today, we are interviewing Jessica Reilly. She is a candidate running for the office of School Committee. This position is for a 3-year term. There are 2 positions open, and she is running opposed. How are you doing today, Jessica?
I'm great, thank you. I've been so excited about this. As soon as I heard that I'd actually be able to talk to you and get some input from the high school students and really understand kind of where you guys are also thinking about how the school committee runs, and as well as the selectmen. I was just overjoyed when I heard that, so
That's
thank
great.
you.
Why do you want to run for the office of School Committee?
So I have, the short answer is, I have 2 kids who are in the Medfield schools, and I have always been very interested in education and also in systems. My training is as a social worker. I have an MSW from Simmons College. And I've realized through that training and through that time and over the 25 years that I've worked with kids and with families that education is truly opportunity. And then when you are not able to access education, then you are frequently left floundering in our society. Medfield has the most amazing educational system, and there are incredible positives. We have had just the best experiences with teachers. I also know that as a system, there are always challenges. Over the last 6 years since my son has been in, my oldest son has entered school here, I have always tried to be as involved as I possibly can, and not just at a classroom level, which is incredibly important, or at a school level, also important, but really trying to get the higher view of what's going on within the district and kind of get an oversight of how we have such a small town, and yet we are able to provide the level of education that we do. So,
thank you. What experiences have you had in the past that will help you in this position?
This is a really interesting journey for me in some ways, because through talking to my family, I was like, well, I'm gonna run for school committee. I feel like it's time. I've been looking for a really long time about, when would the right opportunity be. I've been so interested in the schools, and I found out through through my family that both sides of my grandparents had actually been on school committee in their respective districts when my parents were small. And I think it actually speaks to how important my family of origin has always felt that education is. We were talking earlier that actually my undergraduate education is as a BA in theater, and that's what I wanted to do. It was truly my passion at that point. When I moved to Boston to pursue that, I was lucky enough to end up at the Wheelock Family Theater that has more of a mission around bringing theater to everyone. I got to see so many schools, so many kids. I ended up being able to work with their deaf youth theater there, and I saw the challenges that happen when you don't have access to the education that you need. At which point I decided that it was important for me to start really thinking about how I could advocate for children and families. As I worked within community mental health and then got my master's in social work and became an LICSW, which I don't carry right now, and worked with psychiatric populations of children, worked with larger populations of adults with mental health issues, I could really see that so often when learning issues weren't addressed early on, they compounded problems, truly. I've actually, since the time I've been in the school, I've worked at a larger district level because I'm so interested in that. I also am the charter board member of a preschool in Dover that I started along with a few other parents in Dover and in Medfield. And we've been running that for the last 5 years. So we're really understanding kind of where educational policy comes from at a small child level, at a preschool level. So
that's awesome. What is one of the biggest challenges facing the town of Medfield, and how might you approach this on the school committee?
So the funny thing about Medfield is that we have this great school system that is both nationally recognized on a state level, and we somehow fund this almost entirely on the backs of property taxes. And one of the greatest challenges is, there's no cavalry coming, right? There's not going to be a mall. There's not going to be a huge business that is going to come in and kind of essentially give us the gift of taxes to be able to supplement our property taxes. So the challenges become, how do we continue to have this really fantastic school system? And how do we run so efficiently within the town and within the school system together that we can continue to provide that level of service without overtaxing all of our citizens? And that's really when it comes down to it, that is absolutely the biggest challenge of being in the Medfield school system. How do you do what you need to do on what is always going to be limited resources?
If there's one thing that you would like the voters to know about you, what might that be?
As I've thought about my campaign, the word that has always occurred to me is committed. That my husband and I, when we moved here 15 years ago, we really committed to Medfield. We understood that Medfield was a community that runs on its volunteers, and that communities work when people get involved. My focus for the last 25 years has been education in children and how we build our communities that way. And that is really where I come from as a candidate, that I have been committed to the Medfield Public Schools, that if I am privileged enough to be elected, this is not a 3-year commitment for me. I don't come in for 3 years and say, okay, well, that was fun. I really look at it and say, okay, and if I am privileged enough to be elected again, I will run another term. Because that's what we need, is longevity and an understanding that there is learning curves to everything, and that we need to have an idea of the history and the background of our school system and of our town.
Thank you. A big issue with the town of Medfield's boards and elected offices is communication. How do you plan to reach a broader audience if elected and provide more transparency?
That is absolutely correct. Communication within Medfield is desperately needed. I think we are trying very hard in many ways to get there, but there does need to be a unified way of communicating, and not simply me communicating to the constituency, me communicating to you as a student, me communicating to your parents, me communicating to the seniors who live in our town. It's not just that. It's also communication within the town, that the school department and the town administration need to be able to communicate in a way so that we're all able to sit at the table and say, how do we share our resources? How do we work smart with our money and with our effort so that we can continue as a town to meet the challenges that we are going to face? There are some huge projects coming up. The hospital is an enormous issue. There are so many wonderful things that could happen there. But if we don't all communicate, it could also be a real challenge and difficult time for us. Same thing with the schools. Right now, administrations have changed, and kind of understanding about educational policy may change and will be different 10 years from now, no matter who's in office. Will we have the same level of federal funding? Will we have the same level of state funding? We don't know these things. We need to be able to talk to each other and have very meaningful conversations that do not always have to be conversations about what we agree on, but what we also differ on, so that we can come to some sort of consensus and plan.
What has been your biggest challenge so far in this campaign?
This. You know something, I don't think of this as a campaign. This is a conversation. This is a conversation amongst neighbors, amongst community. And there has really not been any part of it that's hard. I am probably known for being the person that if you don't want to talk about the schools, you should probably move on and talk to somebody else or try not to catch my eye.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that I have been able to go out and have conversations with people that I don't ordinarily get to talk to outside of my kind of early to late elementary school bubble, as well as kind of my kind of larger district bubble around the MCPE, which I've been on for the last 2 years, or any of the elementary school committee meetings that I've been on, or the superintendent's committee meeting, but to really be able to go out and talk to people that I just don't get to run into in my daily life. I can't see that as a challenge. It's actually been a great time. I'm looking forward to doing more of it, actually. And that's one of the things I think is actually the most important part about the longevity of being on the school committee, is that you also need to make sure that you are talking to people every single day, whether you are running for election or you just want to know what's going on. Because those are the things that allow you to steer a school district in the best way, I think.
One way to improve public education without spending more money is to cut the bureaucracy and red tape that makes it difficult for principals and teachers to do their jobs. How would you propose getting it done?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I would be able to do that at the level of the Medfield the Medfield School Committee in reality. Within Medfield itself, you can, again, make connections, make sure that we are talking to each other, be able to do things like currently the school department, for the very first time, the school department and the town are sharing a facilities manager. There's one person paid for by both that now take a look at our schools and the townhouse and the center and all of the school-owned and town-owned properties. Previously, that was kind of like 2 jobs, and they worked like this instead of really being able to join together. Those are things that we can tweak at our level. Can I cut red tape around federal forms around funding and things like that? Unfortunately, no, I can't, except by my own advocacy and all of our advocacies around schools. You know, like when we want to change something, we need to work very hard at expressing to our elected officials that that's something we want to change.
There have been a few contractual issues in the school system regarding raising wages for staff. How would you, as a local politician, help to eliminate future problems around this issue?
You know, I think communication is everything. And that sounds a little simple, but it's actually not. You know, when you are negotiating a contract with any group of employees, there are always many, many, many different points of view within even that group of employees. And they have to send representatives to be able to speak to the representatives of their negotiating committee. I think that the most important part of that is trying to keep the lines of communication open and also keeping trust open. One of the things that the district did the last time teacher's contract was negotiated is that they went forward with this, and the teachers did too, which is fantastic, this kind of solutions-based kind of negotiating, where everybody came together at a table. It wasn't proposals back and forth on paper about this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. But people sat down and really talked about what mattered to them. And that was the first phase of that contract. And then when there were things that needed to be worked out and weren't quite in alignment for everybody, then they went back to some of that back and forth. And I see that as a learning process for how we then manage the next round of negotiations. What did we learn from the process of sitting down together and putting our interests all on the table? And what did we learn from the process as that moved forward? So,
Thank you.
thank you.
You now have 2 minutes to address the TV audience.
I may or may not take the full 2 minutes. I feel so privileged to live in Medfield. I feel privileged that I have been able to be as involved with the schools as I have been for the last 6 years. I find that this system has so many true positives to it. I think that there are a lot of changes coming down the pike, and I think it's incredibly important that we address those, that we put them out, we state them, and we communicate them. Because if we have a plan for the changes that are happening, growth in population, increases in housing, increases in how, or difficulties in how we are funded, if we have plans for those things, they do not have to be crises. They can be worked through. But I think you need to have a sense of history, an overview of what's happened in the district over a short period of time and as well as a much longer period of time. And that you need to be able to know and talk to the people who can help you make things happen, both at the Medfield level, at the state level, and at a federal level. And I sincerely hope that I get the privilege of being able to be on the Medfield School Committee. Thank you.
I wish to thank the candidate for participating in this interview.
Thank you.
Please remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Please vote at the Center on Icehouse Road on Monday, March 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. Thank you.